Hi, my name is Haley, and I'm a PhD candidate in the sociology department here at UCSD, and I am one of the graduate writing consultants. So this afternoon, I'm going to be covering the fellowship workshop that was run by the Writing Hub in the fall quarter. It has a focus on the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship, but many of the principles that I'm going to be talking you through in the first half of this presentation is going to apply to any fellowship that you write, really. So we're going to start there and then dig a little bit more into the Ford specifically. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, why do these opportunities exist? These opportunities, like any other form of writing, are going to serve a purpose. And the purpose here is to fund students so they being the institutions or individuals who are offering these fellowships, they want to fund students and researchers who they think are going to be good stewards of their intentions. So this is going to be the grounding principle for the entire workshop and the content, because recognizing that this is it, this is what they're looking for, will hopefully lower the threshold for participating in the application process. So let's dig a little bit more into what Stewards of Intentions looks like. So when we talk about stewards of intentions, keep in mind that pretty much any fellowship opportunity is really just there to represent the intentions of its funders. So what they want to see in the world, what they would like to see happen, that's really going to be at the heart of any fellowship opportunity. So the individuals and the organizations are seeking to distribute resources to further those missions and values. And in the case of graduate student research, they are looking to, distribute resources to researchers and writers who they see as helping with that particular mission. So this principle is going to hold for private foundations like the Ford, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit, public agencies like the NSF, and even university offices, units, or departments. So this is what's really at the core of any fellowship opportunity that you could be applying for. Any department, any individual, any private or public agency is simply looking for ways in which they can further their missions and values and find people that are going to be good stewards of those missions and values. So what does this mean for applicants? Again, in the spirit of trying to lower that threshold of participation for these fellowship applications, because they can feel quite high stakes, let's make it simpler. So what this means for you if you are going to apply to any of these opportunities is that you need to recognize that you are entering into a rhetorical situation. And so when we say rhetorical situation, what we mean is that this is an opportunity or an occasion for communication where you, the writer, are going to be asked to persuasively connect with your reader so that you can move them in a particular understanding or view. You've done this plenty of times as a writer. Anytime you're writing, you're entering into a rhetorical situation, whether it's a course paper in seminar, whether it is a memo for a reading, a research article, or even an email to your advisor. These are all rhetorical situations. So applying for a fellowship is another version of that. It's not a list or anything like that. So let's think a little bit more concretely about what it means to persuasively connect with your reader when it comes to a fellowship application, because it can be difficult when that reader is unknown to you. So what does it mean to persuasively connect with a reader that you can't really know or even really know who they are? So let's start here, that there's a fine line, a fine distinction between connecting with your reader and writing what you think your reader wants to hear. Because often if we write for that second one, it can come across as really inauthentic, and it can be really hard to write for that too, because you have no idea what they want to hear, and it moves you away from talking about you and your research. So basically, try to stop stressing about who these folks are. Don't let that faceless reader freak you out, because you can't control them. But there are lots of things that you can control in this application process. So let's focus on that. So this is about, thinking carefully about the intentions of the funding opportunity, thinking really carefully about who you are as a steward of those intentions, presenting yourself and your work and your aspirations authentically. So again, not what you think this particular faceless reader wants to hear, but who you are and what you do. And then finally, crafting a writer responsible text in order to persuade them and connect. And so when we say writer responsible text, what we mean is crafting statements that are easy to follow and enjoyable to read. So these are the four things that we are going to be focusing our time on in this workshop, because this is where you're going to be able to engage that rhetorical situation and really, connect with that reader and get done when you want to get done. So what does this mean for actually persuasively connecting with the reader if you focus on the things that you can control? So let's first distinguish between what your aim is with these application materials and what your aim is not. So you're not trying to convince the audience for this application that you are smart and accomplished because you're here. You're in graduate school, you've made it into this program, you are smart and you are accomplished. You're also not trying to show off all of those impressive achievements, although I can only imagine that they would be numerous. You're also not trying to convince your reader that you have everything figured out by crafting this perfect research plan or perfect personal statement. That's not what they're really interested in. That's not what they're really interested in reading. So you're also not going to try to convince your reader that you're the most qualified applicant that they've ever seen. And so the reason why this is not what you're actually trying to do with these application materials is because when we write for this set of aims, when we write for these four things, we end up writing something that is simultaneously quite bland, but really dense, because it's super vague. These are really, really vague purposes. So let's reframe this so that your aim can be much clearer. So instead, your aim is to demonstrate that you understand the intentions of the given funding opportunity, that you are going to align your written accounts, so any personal or research statements that you're asked to provide, and align them with the intentions of their particular institution or department or individual, so on and so forth. And finally, you're going to offer a curated retelling of your experiences and or a proposal of research that would be relevant to this audience. So again, this second set of aims is much clearer, and it gives us an achievable purpose that we can approach with real thought and real intention and holding on to that kind of authentic voice. So let's pair those aims that we outlined on the previous slide to actions that you can take in order to get yourself there. So if one of your aims is to demonstrate that you understand their intentions, whether this is, a public or private institution, so on and so forth. So what you're going to need to do is research the agency and the program to detect their values. Spend a little bit of time on their website, dig in through the call, try to figure out what is their mission? What do they value? What are they trying to do? And so from there, as you attempt to align your written accounts, so those statements that almost every fellowship application asks for, aligning them with their intentions is going to involve determining the major themes that could anchor your statements. And so those themes are going to come from your research on the agency or program and the values that you see in that. So things like social justice or equity or advancing science for the public good, those are going to be themes that you could draw on to anchor your statements and provide an organizing concept. Finally, if you need to offer that curated retelling of your experiences or proposal of research that's going to be relevant to this audience, that is going to require that you, the writer, reconsider, reorganize, and or retell your personal or research stories to incorporate and address those major themes. So I want to pause and make sure that it's really clear that when I say a curated retelling, I'm not encouraging anyone to create a fictionalized or deeply embellished recounting of their, past or their research stories. But it's also not a factual reporting, not a sitting down and listing off everything that you could possibly include in either of these statements. Instead, it's thinking about what are the pieces of that story that really speak to the values or really speak to the mission of one of these institutions or, the folks that are offering up the fellowship money. So giving yourself an opportunity to really think about what are the ways in which you align. And so I think that this does a couple of really important things. And all of these are, again, related back to this idea of lowering the threshold of participation. So, first, if through your research and figuring out these themes and thinking about your personal research story or background leads you to the conclusion that your research does not align with the values of a particular fellowship, let yourself off the hook. There is no the reward is not going to be super great for forcing yourself into this realignment. It's going to feel really awkward and it will likely not work. So let yourself off that hook. If the answer is yes, that you see your work and your research aligning with these values that you find in the, calls or fellowship history, then yes, you should totally do it. And I would even encourage, if your answer is maybe, but I'm not totally certain, that you should go for it too. Because even if they say no, you will have still benefited from writing and thinking about this process in a really meaningful way, so that when you do find a fellowship that really matches with where you can see that alignment, you'll have the practice and you'll feel more confident in engaging with it. So let's think about how each of these parts is connected and what that process of aligning with intentions could look like. So again, let's follow that step-by-step process that we outlined on the last slide and start with the agency. So spend a little bit of time researching its purpose, its mission, the history of funding models. So what are the kinds of projects that they funded in the past? Explore the other programs that they might have or other areas of their work. This will give you a broader understanding of the agency and where it locates itself kind of in public science or whatever their particular interest of engaging is. But this gives you a starting place so that you can start to get a sense of what they value, what their mission might be, because any fellowship that they offer is going to align with those missions, but it just might get a little bit more specific. So when it comes to the fellowship, take some time to understand the role that this program plays in the agency's broader mission. So this might look like the history of the program, the basis for selection, but especially the intended impacts of the program on recipients. So are they looking to shape future tenure track scholars? Are they looking to fund the next big policy writer? That should all be there for you to find in the fellowship description. So beginning to understand how the fellowship fits into that broader mission is going to give you clues about what to write in your research proposal. So from once you have a clear handle on the agency and the fellowship, then begin to pivot and think about yourself. So what are the aspects of your experiences, your aspirations, and research that connect to that program or connect to the broader agency? Start to really think about where those linkages lie. And then finally, I think it's really important that you also think about you as a human being who has values and motivations and desires too, because you and what you want should also line up with the fellowship and with the agency, because that's going to make it easier to think about what are the aspects of your experience and your aspirations that you can draw on to align with those broader intentions. So, this is a really helpful brainstorming tool to find the points of alignment between you, your experiences, the fellowship program, and the agency. I would really, really press upon you, dear listener, that you take your time with this a little bit, because these points of alignment are going to become the grounding themes for your personal statements and research proposals. So again, whether that's the importance of engaging in public science, or using a particular method, or emphasizing things that have not really been studied before or ignored by the academy, all of that is going to help you figure out what the pieces of your experiences or the pieces of your research are that are going to really resonate with the agency and the fellowship. It's going to make it a little bit easier. So, before drafting any component of the application, start with a brainstorming activity. Ask yourself these 4 questions. First, who is my audience? What agency is funding this? Where did they, get their money from? What's their position in society? And then from there, ask yourself, what do they value? What is their mission? What are the things that they want to see happen in the world? Then, how can you align yourself? And then finally, what will they need? So they being the readers of your application, what will they need in order to see those alignments? What do they want to know about you? Because implicitly, what they need is what you are going to have to provide in your materials. So we're going to be spending the rest of this walkthrough doing some of this with the Ford Foundation Fellowship. So looking at who is the audience, what do they value, how can we begin to align ourselves, and what will they need? So again, going to do this with the Ford Foundation Fellowship, going to provide an overview, and then hopefully you'll jump into a little bit of brainstorming once you get to the end. So let's start from the beginning. What is the Ford Foundation? So quite briefly, the Ford Foundation is a private foundation. It was founded nearly 100 years ago. And yes, it's that Ford. This is the foundation established by, the Henry Ford family, the automakers. That's where they get their money from. So the Ford Foundation is what provides the funds for the awards. So they're donating the money that is used to help, in the case of the predoctoral dissertation, newer doctoral researchers get started. But the award is actually administered through the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. So we also need to be asking ourselves, well, what are the national academies? So again, briefly, the National Academies are a collection of 3 nonprofit professional societies. So in this case, the National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, and National Academy of Medicine. So among these, there are 7 major program areas that focus on behavioral and social sciences and education, earth and life sciences, engineering and physical sciences, a particular research program focused on the Gulf of Mexico, health and medicine, policy and global affairs, and transportation research, excuse me. So there's a lot happening here. It'll be worth taking our time to pause and look at what are the missions and values for each of these. So let's do that. So this is based on a look through each of the websites to try to pull what are kind of the higher level missions and values that they talk about pretty consistently. So again, you don't need to spend like dozens and dozens of hours on this. I pulled this, just reading through for 30 minutes or an hour. It's definitely worth the time. So for the Ford Foundation, they talk a lot about having a social justice orientation. They really emphasize things like human rights, social policy, a more equitable distribution of resources across the world. So again, this is the Ford Foundation more broadly, not the Ford Fellowship, the Predoctoral Fellowship. Sorry about the dog in the background. Gets a little bit overexcited. So the Ford Foundation also emphasizes democratic values, global cooperation, social innovation through investing in individuals. So I highlighted in purple the things that stand out for the Ford Foundation in connection to the fellowship opportunities that they provide. And we're going to be using this color coding kind of throughout the rest of this talk through to just help keep things clear visually when it can get a little bit confusing. So I did the same thing for the national academies and their missions and values. So here we see a lot of like informing public policy through scientific evidence-based advice. So, public science, engaging with stakeholders, so on and so forth. The National Academies also aims to advance science in the United States more generally, and this can be connected to who the members are. So they're often scientists, they are only scientists in the US who are experts in their fields. And the National Academies also emphasizes providing objective analysis to solve complex social and political problems. So here we see a lot of public engagement and doing good science. So, who is the audience? Who on earth are we writing to when we are thinking about our application? Whose values are driving the bus? Well, rather than having this either or mindset where you need to be thinking about talking to the Ford Foundation or the National Academies, consider where the values of Ford and the National Academies converge. So we can pull the more equitable distribution of resources, as well as social innovation through investing in individuals from the Ford Foundation, excuse me, as well as the goal and value of advancing science and scientists in the United States and providing scientific and evidence-based advice to solve complex social problems from the slide previously. And then ask ourselves, well, what might we assume about the values and intentions of this Ford Foundation funded and National Academies administered fellowship? So this next set is pulled from the Ford Fellowship pages. So here we see these goals of increasing the diversity of the nation's college and university faculties, maximizing educational benefits of diversity, increasing the number of professors who can and will use diversity as a resource for enriching education. So here, the reason this is blue is because we can see the values of both the Ford Foundation and the National Academies converging here. So this is about, addressing inequalities in higher education, but also investing in, particular individuals, and specifically individuals who are going to be doing science at a university and teaching as well. The fellowships seek to award individuals with evidence of superior academic achievements in a research-based PhD or science program. So here, they're not quite as well synthesized, but we can see the Ford and the National Academies happening all together. Awarding individuals committed to teaching and research at the college or university levels, and specifically in the US. So this award does focus on you know, citizens, nationals, or permanent residents, folks who have been granted deferred action status under DACA, Indigenous individuals, political asylees or refugees. So this is in line with the National Academy's values. And finally, of course, they are interested in awarding individuals regardless of these various markers. So by using color coding, we can really see how the values of both of these organizations come together. So in a very literal combination with the blue points at the top, and then complement each other with the blue and the purple. So again, these are pulled from the description, and it's such a good use of time to pause and notice how they speak to each other, because you're not writing for two different audiences. You're writing for a singular audience that has complementing perspectives. So let's get into a little bit more detail about the predoctoral fellowship application requirement. So in the requirements, they list off, different kinds of qualities that they expect the predoctoral fellowship application folks to have. So in this case, it's 3 or more years of doctoral study, this due date in mid-December. You have a CV, which lists off your publications, your service, all of that good stuff, as well as 3 to 5 letters of recommendation. However, it's these last 3 components: the personal statement, the statement of previous research or scholarly activity, the statement of proposed graduate research and future future goals, where you are going to be asked to align yourself with those different values. So let's dig into this just a little bit more. 3 statements can be a lot. So let's talk through what each of these can be. So you have the previous research and scholarly activity. I would encourage you to think about that as past you, where you've been, what you've accomplished, the personal statement as present you, where you are now, and what you want to get and what you're going to do in the short term. And then finally, proposed plan and career goals. That's really about future you. So in that previous research and scholarly activity statement, focus on the experiences you've had and the things that you've learned from those experiences. For future you, really think about the interests you are pursuing, why they really matter to you, and how you will keep pursuing them beyond the short term. So that leaves the personal statement. So this is between your past and your future, where you are right now and what you're going to be doing in the short term, usually in the next couple of years of graduate school. So these 3 statements are those opportunities for you to curate that experience and demonstrate to your audience how you align with those values, and use those grounding values and themes to carry across these versions of yourself so that you have a coherent, synthesized, you know, reader friendly statements about where you were, where you are now, and what you want to do in the future. So, I would encourage everyone to maybe hit pause here during this workshop demo and pause and look up the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship and give yourself, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes to read through it and make a note about the different values that you notice moving forward. So, after reading through it, there are some more values, some more important values that we haven't already talked about that you could tap into as you think about your statements and how you want to align yourself. So, they also discuss having sustained personal engagement with communities that are underrepresented in the academy and an ability to bring that sustained engagement as an asset to the learning, teaching, and scholarship at the college or university level. In fact, they even specify that membership in one or more groups whose underrepresentation in the American professorate has been severe or longstanding would count and be something that they would consider. Additionally, responding in pedagogically productive ways to the learning needs of students from diverse backgrounds was really emphasized. And finally, using the diversity of human experience as an educational resource in teaching and scholarship. So here we can see that in addition to the, need for investing in individuals who have a willingness to engage with the university and produce good research and teach, that they're also really interested in making sure that that adds to the diversity of the university as well. So all of these are themes that you would be able to use to ground those different statements. So how do you bring these themes into your statements? We can see that we have diversity and representation from the Ford Fellowship, the Ford Foundation, and the work of academics from the National Academies really informing what is going on with the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship. So when you ask that question, how do you bring those themes into the statements you write? There's no right or wrong answer. It's really up to you. And what matters most is that it is authentic to you. So when you are thinking through your previous research and scholarly activity, what are the experiences you've had and what you've learned from those experiences that could really speak to these values? Similarly, where you are now and what you're going to be doing in the short term, again, how will that what are the pieces of curated experience that can speak to these values? And finally, in the longer term, the interests you are pursuing, what matters to you, and how you will be pursuing it. Talk about them in a way that is going to demonstrate how you align with the goals and the mission of the Ford Fellowship. So if you're not sure, that's totally okay. All you need to do is start thinking and writing about it. We learn so much when we sit down to try to write drafts or when we sit down to try to actually write something out. It's some of the best thinking that we do. So start brainstorming, start drafting. It's going to be fine. You can always revise it for later. So at this point, we are halfway there. We are halfway there. You have now thought pretty concretely about who the audience is. You've thought pretty concretely about what do they value. And so what's left is for you to start doing that work of thinking about how you can align yourself, what themes can you use to talk about your past research experience, your plans for the future, all of that great stuff. And then 4, what will they need? What will I need to provide? What are the ways in which you can pull from those experiences? What are the pieces that you really want them to know? So the next step for you, if you're thinking about applying for the Ford Fellowship, is to start that brainstorming and discover those new ideas. Because, yep, from here on out, it's all on you. But you don't have to do it alone. So I would encourage anybody who is listening to this or thinking about applying to the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship or any fellowship to book a writing consultation. So in a writing consultation, you can get personalized feedback from another, a fellow graduate student who is a trained writing consultant that will address your concerns and the questions you have about the writing and give you clear, concrete tasks to do afterwards. It's very like chill and empathetic, very low stakes, and it's totally wonderful. So what you would do is you go to the Writing Hub at the Teaching and Learning Commons, and if you click on the grad student menu, you'll see this option called Make an Appointment. And so that's going to take you to uh, the Writing Hub online. So the web address is ucsd.wconline.com. And so if you've never booked an appointment before, they're going to ask you to register for an account. And all you're going to do is fill in some information about your name, your email, your experiences with writing, just to get a sense of who you are and where you're at. And then from there, it'll take you to the schedule for graduate writing consultants, and you can book an hour, up to an hour in a single slot in a single day, and up to 2 hours total for the week. Genuinely, I cannot emphasize enough how wonderful writing consultations are and how useful they can be. I wish I had been doing it for years. But now you have the opportunity. And don't forget to stay connected. You can always reach out with any questions that you have at by emailing writinghub@ucsd.edu, and take a look at any of the workshops or other activities that are being offered by checking out writinghub.ucsd.edu. There's also an Instagram and a Facebook if you want to stay more up to date. But thank you so much for your time and sticking with me as we walk through fellowship applications and the Ford Fellowship more specifically. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.